All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Ageless Movement podcast. Hopefully you're having a lazy Sunday or maybe a highly productive Sunday. I'd say our Sundays are a combination of both. Do a lot of stuff, whole lot of stuff on Saturday, and then I do a lot of stuff on Sunday as well, but then there's time for us to do a lot of things and calm down and enjoy the weekend. Okay, so what's the topic for today, Sang? Oh, we forgot to tell him. I'm Scott.
I'm Sang.
And we're here to talk about fitness, an ageless movement. Okay, what's the topic for today?
I think I was asking you that.
Oh, yes. So it looks like we're not prepared at all, but we actually are prepared. So here's the thing. We were discussing about a week ago what we were going to talk about for week 2 of our podcast. And it hit me. What is the most pressing concern in America right now? The coronavirus. How do you train in a pandemic? How do you exercise and maintain your health in a pandemic? So we decided we were going to talk about that today. And ironically, San Mateo County is now not only on the watch list, but as of yesterday, I guess they're rolling us back to stage 2. And what is it? Nail salons, hair salons, gyms have to close unless they can operate outside. But I don't know that nail salons can be open outside. Anyway, we're not really here to talk about nail salons, although we are very sympathetic and empathetic with people that are now having to apply for unemployment again. Okay, so how do you train during a pandemic, Sang? How has it changed, if any, for you at all?
So oddly for me, very little changed. Mostly going into this pandemic, for me a big thing was being on schedule and not just letting my free time just be free. So initially, I started, connecting with my community to figure out what we could do together to figure out this whole thing and learn from each other. So I spent a lot of time talking to other coaches, trying to figure out what the plans were going to be, especially in fitness. As a coach, we tend to be kind of out on our own. We don't have a lot of people to really help out. We're fortunate, but I know there are probably a lot of coaches out there who have always run their business on their own. So for me, it was scheduled, not much changed. I still tried to maintain my kettlebell workouts on the same days that I always did.
Can I interrupt you for one moment?
Yeah.
So, you are unique in the sense that you have access to whatever equipment you normally need to exercise. Now, this is kind of a funny conversation for her and I, because I've always been a person that belongs to a gym, multiple gyms I might add, and I never really owned exercise equipment, at least in the house or whatever, because I always exercise at gyms. I never imagined a day when we wouldn't be allowed to go outside. Okay, so you pretty much just need your kettlebells. What else do you need? Why don't you go over the bare essentials of what you need to exercise to help people that are
For me,
struggling?
the whole reason why I got into kettlebells was all I needed was a kettlebell. It could go in my car and it could go wherever I needed to go.
Just one kettlebell?
Yeah, but don't laugh.
But I mean, don't you get stronger? Some movements you can do more weight, others you do less.
I said initially I started
Okay.
by I wanted a piece of equipment that I technically only needed one. Now, mine have grown.
That is true.
Into a big family.
Like a lot of things.
And so Scott thought he'd never have equipment in the house, and that is pretty much all I have in the house.
What I think we'll do today is maybe I'll pan the camera so you can see
Maybe some other
our whole entire family room.
Maybe some other day.
It's basically a gym. We got a barbell, we got bumper plates, which I could use obviously, and kettlebells. We got all kinds of rollers. We even have a what is this called again?
A core line.
We have a core line. Core line. It's amazing. It's like a piece of Pilates equipment. Anyway, we're getting distracted here. So basically, you got into it initially because of the minimal amount of equipment you needed.
Correct.
Well, that's a good way of looking at it.
So once the pandemic hit, I was able to find groups that were just kind of doing stuff 10 minutes a day, and I just every day that was how I started my day. Was okay. What should I do today? I always had some other plan for the day, but I was just always curious what other people were doing. So that's what I did, just to be a part of something, not be out on my own and sulk on what's happening out in the world, because I knew we still had to survive somehow.
And it's true.
So yeah, pretty much the only thing that changed for me was connecting with more people that I normally don't. I used to just go to the gym, go work out, and those were the people I connected with. And now I'm finding myself connecting with people from all over the country and all over the world. And that's pretty much the only change for me.
So yeah, I've noticed you watch a lot of videos.
I watch a lot of videos.
A lot of exercise videos. And it's kind of funny because half the videos she's exercising. The other half, she's just watching people work out. And I don't know, it's just a funny thing to walk into a room and see somebody watching someone really working hard. Okay, and there's a metronome going and all this stuff, and my honey buddy's in a blanket, eating some pudding, watching it. It's just cracks me up.
It's all about intention.
Okay, that's great.
And for you?
Now, for me, I will have to say, I was more impacted than you.
Yes.
Because, I like to have heavy dumbbells. Now, I am really kind of unique in the sense we both are. Where we work, we have equipment and we have access to it, because our whole careers have changed since this pandemic hit, in the sense that as far as classes go, I used to teach a lot of classes. You taught, 3 classes, right? 4? Including the country club?
Yeah, 3 classes.
Okay. Well, you had level 2 circuit. You had neuromuscular,
evening
weight
4.
loss. Yeah, you had 4 classes.
4 classes.
So I probably times 4 is what I taught, right?
Yeah.
And what we've slowly been able to do at where we work, and it's basically a nonprofit. The way we've survived and figured things out, I did a lot of YouTube. I basically shot videos of all the classes and uploaded them to YouTube. Now we're making the transition to Zoom. And we're still going to have some YouTube classes for people that don't want to have an interactive class, that like just, clicking on YouTube and watching the class and participating when they want to do it. But for the most part, people are really starting to embrace Zoom and the interactive nature of it, given the constraints that we're under now. So for me, I had to be at work anyway for both of us to teach. However, yes, I would prefer to be at a gym because we don't have dumbbells past 60. I like to do heavy dumbbell presses, and when I'm in good shape and there's no injuries, I can press 130-pound dumbbells for reps. And we've only got 60-pound dumbbells, so I'm not all that challenged there. They're fine for overhead pressing movement. That's actually pretty good weight. But there's other things. I find I'm doing a lot of body weight work. Push-ups are, and doing push-ups correctly that's a whole different topic we could talk about in a future podcast. But push-ups are one of those exercises that strengthen you in a number of areas that actually stabilize and protect your shoulders, including this muscle right here, the anterior serratus. And you might not have known this, but there's really only 2 movements that strengthen that serratus. There's throwing a punch, right? Which isn't the most realistic thing for most people because you don't want to hit a heavy bag. And as we learned in Doc, what's his last name again? Okay.
Cobb.
Doc Cobb, Dr. Cobb. He's a chiropractor and a former mercenary. We took a tactical defense class from him. You never want to punch with with a closed fist, because you break your wrist. If you watch MMA fighters and boxers, they're wrapped in their wrists. So anyway, not to get distracted here, but the point is, what I'm trying to say is, I was teaching, we're both teaching at our work, so we have access to equipment. I just don't have access to all the things I would like to have. But the push-ups are really good because, like I said, the only way to strengthen the anterior serratus is either through a punch or the extensor part of a push-up. And that's a great movement. A lot of it too is based on the plank. When you get into the plank and you zipper your legs together and you engage your abs, engage your glutes, that's core strength. And core strength is there for you to stabilize your spine while you're lifting heavier weight. And it's one of those movements that I would call is a really good prerequisite for anything you're going to do in strength. It's a foundational movement is the word I was looking for. Okay, doing a lot of pull-ups as well, but what I find is I have to be very careful with how I do the pull-ups because I don't do them really narrow. I do them medium grip. I try to pull myself up and really get full extension on the bottom, get those lats to stretch. But I find, I'm a guy who's 200 pounds. When you're doing constant sets of pull-ups, exceeding, 10 repetitions for sets of 5, you start getting some soreness in the forearms. And that was one thing I was always a little bit cautious of when I would do pull-ups. I would oftentimes do weighted pull-ups because if you can do more than 10 repetitions, you want to increase some strength, so you add a little bit of weight. But I find I really would only do those no more than once a week. Just because I know it does kind of take a toll on your grip and forearms in certain areas like that. Sometimes it's a little bit hard on the teres and some of these other muscles. And you have to be very aware when you're exercising, especially now in a pandemic. If you can't see your massage therapist or your chiro, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where every time you work out, you're sore for a week. So I've been cautious with my training. The other thing that's really frustrating for me is I can't do deadlifts. I mean, I can do them with a kettlebell. I can do them with 2 kettlebells. But, that's a whole other issue, my hip at the moment. But given that, I really don't have enough weight or any means now to do a deadlift the way I like to do deadlifts because I don't have a barbell. I have a yoke bar, but it's shaped kind of funny, and you really only squat with those. And you put weight on the end of it, And I have a couple of rickety standards that are old, but I put weight on them. And that's what I basically do. And I don't have access to a cable lat pull or a seated row, but I do have access to ropes and a functional trainer, which is basically a cable system. And I can do all my face pulls, which is the number 2 most important movement for shoulder stability, in my opinion. Can do push downs, can do all the other things that I normally do. And I do have dumbbells, so that means I can do overhead pressing, I can do reverse flies, I can do curls if I want. I can do dumbbell rows, but again, with 60 pounds, it's not much of a challenge. So I'm forced to be very creative with my workouts now. I also have a fat boy. No, we're not talking about me. It's basically a small sled you can load weight on, and I strap it around me and I walk it. Now, the only problem with something like that is if you're having any kind of hip issues or foot issues, that's not really the business. You don't want to start pulling weight because you're just reinforcing a negative movement or a negative movement pattern. Anyway, so lots of corrective exercise, lots of body weight exercises, and that's how I'm getting through this. It's not ideal for me because I was back in the gym for almost 2 months, and it's amazing. And I'll say this, the body weight exercises is essential. Everyone should be doing them, whether it's pull-ups or push-ups. They're important. You can even make the argument that Turkish get-up is a form of a body weight exercise. I don't really do it with weight, so for me it's a body weight exercise. But I gotta say, it's just one, for me in my training, it's one bullet in my whole arsenal. One of the things that really helps me with body composition and muscle mass is lifting heavier weight. It's no joke. When we got back into the gym and I was training for a month, I literally dropped 4 pounds of fat, and I know I put on muscle because you could just see the difference. And I'd get on the scale and I'm like lighter and I'm bigger. And you're just not gonna get that from light dumbbells, TheraBands. They're all good, don't get me wrong. But if you're really trying to sculpt your body, it's nice to be able to lift some heavier weight. Now, saying you're a bit unique in that case because you use the kettlebell so much and you have access to so many different weights of kettlebells, you're pretty much still in an ideal situation. Maybe even more ideal because you have a little more time and more space to yourself.
Yeah, the only thing that changed is, I don't have my whole entire rack, so just like Scott, I can't lift heavier because I don't want to truck around a 97-pound kettlebell back and forth, especially in a car, or should something happen and that thing go flying. So I only have 2 main kettlebells that I use, and then occasionally I will whip out 3 others that I don't care for the handles. So they're just there to farmer carry, really, because of what they do to my hands. But what Scott was saying earlier, like for somebody who lifts heavy, the big thing also is just maintaining those movements.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have the weight, you're still going through those motions. A lot of the stuff I do is what we call irradiation with the kettlebells. So if you can irradiate a certain amount of strength, then you should be able to maintain a certain amount also, if your body knows how to get into those positions and basically simulate lifting that type of weight. So at that point, maybe the actual weight of the kettlebell wouldn't matter so much. So those are the things I think about when I lift. So I'm not so, I don't just lift the weight to lift the weight. Like, I think about it from the perspective of, if this were to weigh 3 times what it really does weigh, how does it feel? Do I still push into the ground in the same manner? So I always say setup is everything. If your setup's not good, then something's gonna fall apart down the line. So that's really what I worked the most on, was setup and skill, rather than lifting heavier and heavier weight.
Yeah, and I want to say this, quality of movement is really important. Even though I do lift heavier weight for me, and that's a very vague term, heavy weight, because believe me, I can walk into a gym and there's nobody in the gym that can lift what I can lift on a dumbbell rack or whatever. But then you have to realize it's all perspective. What seems like a lot to some average Joe, which seems like a lot to me, is paperweight for, say, a professional athlete. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, late 90s, I was in my 20s still, and I'm at this gym in San Carlos, and Emmerich Delzig is one of the owners. He's a former professional bodybuilder, and he's friends with all these pros at the time, and he brings Ronnie Coleman into the gym. And I see Ronnie walking, yeah, buddy, and I'm like, oh my God. I've never seen a man that big in my life. He was like 5 men all put together. And he came in there, and I remember he saw me doing heavy dumbbell presses, and he walks up to me, that's real good. That's exactly what he said. He took the heaviest weight I lifted for 6 reps? Yeah, buddy. He flips it up in the air. He did 20 reps. I would do literally 20-pound dumbbells. He didn't have enough weight. Our weights went up to 130. For him, he was doing sets of 30 with 130-pound dumbbells. So I'm only telling you that because, you should always compare you to you. And what's heavy is something that's really, it's perception is what it is more than anything else. And what's heavy for you? When I'm a 90-year-old man, lifting up a 20-pound water jug may be hard for me. That may be a lot of weight at that point. Hopefully it's not, but either way. So yeah, so quality of movement's an important thing. And like saying says, I'm making the most out of my 60-pound dumbbells. But yeah, I do miss the heavier weight. I do miss gyms. I miss being around people. I miss having conversations. I miss arguing with people in between sets. I mean, it's awesome. That's one of the things you love about gyms. And, things have really changed now. And where a lot of us are isolated more, or we're communicating with each other through digital media like we are right now. So that's partly what motivated me to do this podcast, is to reach out to all of you. If any of you ever have a comment or anything, please leave the comment or a question. Go ahead and do it. I would love to address it, or Sang, or both of us. So yeah, it's been challenging. So I guess the next phase of our talk here today is really probably the most important, and why we do these podcasts.
Yes.
How do we help you, right? I mean, let's say you're somebody who doesn't own any exercise equipment. What can one do? I've got a lot of ideas. You got a lot of ideas. Where shall we start?
So for me, just because of the kettlebells, everything for me is functional. So I just go outside and lift some things.
Correct, but we're talking about somebody who doesn't have any kettlebells.
I mean,
Maybe
so I go lift some stuff outside.
Okay.
In place of my kettlebells. They stay indoors.
Like sandbags?
You can lift a sandbag.
What
or
else
mulch,
can they lift? Mulch?
Or I think we've taught a few classes on using our water jug, which is 8 pounds.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah, that's true. You can hold it and do a squat.
Yeah.
Also, wheelbarrows can be really helpful. You can load them up and walk them. It's like a farmer carry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of those movements, they call them farmer carries for a reason. So basically, you're holding weight, you're depressing your shoulder blades, you're engaging your lats, engaging your glutes because you're walking. Now, I'll tell you what, walking's something you always take for granted until you've seriously injured yourself, like I have, and you have to learn to walk again. The other thing, too, is every time you add weight to a movement, you exponentially challenge yourself in terms of the mechanics of the movement. So if you get to where you're a farmer carrying heavy weight, that's another thing I miss about gyms is having a trap bar, putting a bunch of weight on it, deadlifting it to a standing position, and then literally walking the length of the gym. I love that. I love the grip strength I get out of it. Also, I would say the postural development I get out of it because you have to keep those shoulder blades not only depressed but retracted while you walk. And also, it really trains you when you're walking because when you have heavy weight, suddenly walking's not so easy. It's like, whoa, got to pick this leg up. Wow, that means all my weight has to be on this right leg right now. Putting weight on the left leg. Whoa, that means all the weight has to be on the left leg now. And that sounds really easy when you're just holding a plate of food. But when you're carrying, pretty significant weight, like close to your body weight, it's challenging. And if you don't walk properly, you can injure yourself. So that's another thing I miss. So I'm just talking about the things I miss. Let's talk about the things you can do if you don't have any equipment. So wheelbarrow, which is just like the farmer carry. The other thing you could do is you can go to a park, right? There's a bar, usually a pull-up bar at parks.
Are those open?
They are open, actually. What you'll want to bring is hand sanitizer, of course. And you'll probably want to wipe down the bar with Virex or some kind of alcohol wipe. And you're still debating whether they're open or not.
Yeah,
well, we still see
I'm
people
not
in parks.
positive if we see people in parks because they're running on our open fields.
Okay, but I still see
I'm
them
not
on the park
positive.
course, too.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen them, I'm telling you. Anyway, so you can go to your old grammar school, and there's probably nobody there. You can go to monkey bars and do pull-ups, or just try to do the monkey bars. And that may not be the smartest thing for you. If you're overweight and you don't have a lot of muscle, I would retract that previous statement. But if you are in good shape, or even in moderate shape, you may want to consider just hanging on a bar. Just hang.
Hanging's awesome.
Hanging.
Radiation is
Yeah.
awesome.
Hanging. Engage your lats. You'll feel, facet space improve in your vertebrae. That's something you can do. You can always do push-ups at home. You can do lunges. You can do body weight squats. We do whole circuit routines on our Adaptive PE channel where we don't use really any equipment except some light dumbbells, maybe some TheraBands once in a while. But you can do leg lifts from a seated position, keeping your back straight. You can do Turkish get-ups. If you don't know what the Turkish get-up is, maybe we could talk about that in future podcasts. I also would like to talk about, moving objects in cars while stopping, like, kettlebells if you get into a wreck. That's an interesting future podcast. I'm kidding. Yeah, so human projectiles, we'll call it. So there's a lot of things you can do. Pull-ups, you can do Turkish get-ups, you can do squats, you can do lunges, and I get it. If you don't do Turkish get-ups and you're not really sure what it is, don't try to do one. Contact me, or especially Sing, she's the expert on that. But contact somebody who knows a lot about training before you attempt some of these things. But running, there's another thing you can do, right? You can run at a soft clay track. I don't know that I would recommend you running on pavement, especially if you don't normally run on pavement. You can do step-ups. And if you don't have a step-up, maybe you got a big rock where you live that's stable, that doesn't move around. You can do step-ups on that. You could also throw medicine balls around. But we're actually talking about people that don't have any equipment. So, something that's heavy. I don't know, what's heavy?
What's heavy?
Yeah, what's heavy that you can throw, a projectile? Sandbags? I wouldn't throw a sandbag.
I wouldn't throw a sandbag.
Yeah.
That's only because I like my equipment.
Yeah. Well, I mean like a real sandbag, not like an exercise sandbag.
Well, at some point it will burst.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't recommend throwing sandbags, because that will eventually the sand will cause the bag to burst. I mean, you could try it if you don't mind constantly reinvesting in sand.
Yeah, so any type of throwing is probably good too. Throwing and catching, if you're married or you have a friend that you live with. You don't want to be doing that with people you don't live with per se, unless, I don't know, you wear gloves and a mask and you stand 10 feet apart.
Yeah. I mean, this actually hits on another topic. Like, we don't really know what the future of fitness is going to be and how it's going to play out in this pandemic. So, to be quite honest, I tell people it's probably time to invest into what you need. It's probably going to take time anyway, just because like weights are hard to find. But the med ball should be really easy to get a hold of. But at least there's like a handful of things you probably should just go ahead and invest in at this point in time, because we're gonna be indoor or in our homes probably. I mean, at best we'll get a couple months out and about, and then we have to go back in again.
Yeah, so we're looking at about a year, I would guess. So, and the reason why I'm estimating that is you hear about trials, Gilead trials, 30 different potential vaccines that are going through trials. The earliest they're going to be here is probably February or March of next year, which would be fast, by the way. Generally speaking, vaccines aren't developed that quickly. And let's say they work. That's great, but most of these vaccines require multiple inoculations. So in other words, one shot isn't going to do it. It's going to take 2 shots. Now, something to think about. Who's going to pay for all of this, right? What about people that don't have health insurance? Are these companies going to be willing to not make a profit on it? Is our government going to be willing to fund these companies so they are willing to invest not only in the research of the drug, but the application of the drug? See, that's the thing that people don't understand. It's so much more than just, oh, do we have a vaccine? That's only the first hurdle, albeit the biggest hurdle. But the second hurdle is, how do we get our whole entire 325 million Americans inoculated? How do we do that? And especially when you're talking multiple needles, because you have to do multiple shots. So we're really looking at another year. Now, let's look at the let's say the negative view, the pessimistic view. Let's say there is no vaccine in the foreseeable future. Well, what's eventually going to happen is the virus is going to run out of people to infect, and that'll probably take a year. You look at every major pandemic that happened; they generally never went more than 2 years. And we've been very lucky in America. The last out-of-control pandemic we had was 1918. That was called the Spanish flu. Now, why they call it the Spanish flu, I'll never know. It started on an army base in Kansas, yet it earned the name Spanish flu. And to keep in mind, 750,000 Americans died from that. And the scary part about the Spanish flu was you had, I think it was a 25% survival rate if you got it. And in some countries, like Spain, had 8 million deaths from the Spanish flu. So, something to think about. As far as pandemics go, I know this is bad, but compared to the bubonic plague, which killed, 75% of Europe's population, this is manageable. If we just do simple things like wear a mask, wash our hands, clean everything we touch before and after, there's a way to avoid the spread of it. But it requires everyone buying in, not some people, but literally everyone. Okay, so you think we told them enough about how to exercise on their own? You can basically divide it up. You could run one day. You could do body weight training the next. You can do a circuit routine where you run in place even, or just do high knees. You can do quad lifts. You can do Turkish get-ups. You can do squats. You can do side lunges, push-ups even, in a circuit. And it only takes you about a half an hour or 20 minutes, and you could really get a good workout. Now, if you're just looking for overall health and function, that's going to do the trick. If you're really looking to sculpt your body and do some big things, it may take a little while longer than that. But what I recommend is do something every day. And you could rotate between what I call a low impact cardiovascular day where you walk or swim or cycle on your bike versus a strength day where you do muscular endurance stuff, circuit routines, body weight stuff you could even do on another day, and then go back to a cardiovascular day and just do something like where you go 4 days of continuous exercise, but different exercise, and give yourself a rest. Or maybe Monday through Friday you do that routine and you take Saturday off or Sunday off or both and get back to it on Monday. But you're going to want to do some type of exercise, especially if you're spending a lot of time at home, because you don't want to get used to sitting around. Sitting around is bad, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's always things you can do in the house. Okay, if there's some aspect of this topic today that wasn't covered, and you have questions, please leave a comment. And of course, you need to like and subscribe to our channel so we can answer your questions. We'll also post all of our stuff on Facebook, and anybody that needs a link, I can send it to you direct, okay? All right, anything else you want to add, Say?
Just 2 things. I think in a very general thing that I always try to tell my clients, like, this is from the World Health Organization, and the recommendation is 150 minutes of moderate intensity, and then you could potentially go up to 300 minutes a week. So I always try to tell people to just do your best to stay within those parameters, because I think sometimes people think, oh, I did a class this week and then I can sit and watch Netflix the rest of the week. So I just try to get them to stick to those parameters as best as they can. If it's walking, taking classes, or, I mean, for me, like I said, also since I work with clients, like that kind of rounds out their whole week. And then 2 is Scott kind of gave you an idea of how to break up your week and do your exercises, but personally, I've tried to be on his routine. On my body, it's hard. So I do a check-in before I make the decision of how I'm going to break things down. And I can sit down, I mean, every Sunday I sit down and try to figure out, like, what will I do for the week. And it doesn't always play out, so
it's day-to-day a lot.
I check in with myself a lot. You know, in the last episode you heard that I check in with my HRV a lot, my heart rate variability, to make sure that I'm good to work out that day, or if I need to moderate stuff, because even on Friday I was good to go, but I ran late with clients, and so I had to squeeze in a workout, and by that point, like, I could feel stuff happening. And so I literally tailored every exercise and pulled it back to what it should have been. And thank God I did, because the next day I felt it. It probably would have been better for me to walk, but I wanted to go through all of the movements that I'm used to doing. So I went ahead and did it. Luckily, I feel fine, so I don't have to call my massage therapist, which I normally would do.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing, like, because there's not enough, I mean, you can't just go out and do your usual routine and know that you're gonna have somebody there to help out if you need it. Because, I mean, luckily I have an appointment in the books, and I'm always, like, hoping that the place is still open. So even though it might feel like we have our massage therapists available, there could be a day that might not be available anymore for X amount of time. So it's all about taking care of yourself and knowing, like, what your limits are.
That's good. Before we conclude, have you ever explained to them what HRV is? So it just reads your heart rate, right?
Yeah, and you know, we could probably talk about more of that in another podcast. Cause
That's a good topic.
Kind of.
Yeah, we've talked about it. We've glossed over a lot of things, I know, in the first 2 podcasts. But basically what saying is you have to be aware of how you feel on a given day. If you feel like you're overtrained, you probably are. Mm-hmm. Also, you just want to make sure that you're not doing anything self-destructive with your exercise. I've been a victim of my own motivation too many times in exercise, and it just holds you back. It really does. It's just better off sometimes to take a day off from training and stretch and just do some, just to take care of your body, essentially. Not just sit around, but stretch and do things to address pain, whether it's rolling your fascia out or working on mobility, whatever it may be. You're better off taking care of yourself on days like that rather than going in the gym and pushing it even harder. I've learned the hard way many times. Okay, so I hope we've been a part of your Sunday. We wish to be a part of your future Sundays. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Anything else before we sign off?
That's it.
All right, everyone, have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday.